In a world where every man, woman, and dog has a smartphone with more megapixels than sense, Pentax once again decided to do something slightly weird. It released a brand new film camera in 2025. But this isn't just any old film camera, oh no, this is designed specifically for film newbies and anyone of the younger generations who are way more familiar with using a smartphone rather than a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. As a result, it shoots vertically and prioritizes automation over manual control. It wants you to point, shoot, and kind of move on with your life rather than getting too bogged down in the technical aspects of film photography. Which raises the question, does it actually make shooting film easier and more fun?
Only one way to find out.
Well, in some ways, yes, it does, but also in many other ways, it also makes the process even more confusing. Now, for context, I have dabbled in film photography a few times in the past couple of decades, because personally I like the aesthetic of film photography. I love the tactile shooting experience of using older cameras, and I've always dreamed of being one of those cool edgy film photographers you see on Instagram, but let's face it, that ship's probably sailed. However, every time I shoot film, I'm also immediately reminded about the three main things I dislike about this medium. A, the expense, because film stock and processing fees aren't getting any cheaper. B, how unforgiving it can be. As you'll see later on, this format is very vulnerable to a whole host of potential f***ups. Some self-inflicted, others not. And C, and this one's the big one, for someone like me who's almost certainly got some form of undiagnosed ADHD, the whole take a photo now and then casually wait 3 to 4 weeks and pay hundreds of dollars before you can actually see the results thing, well, that doesn't give me the daily dopamine hit that my brain needs in order to maintain my interest. So when Pentax said that this camera was designed to offer a more relaxed, stress-free experience for people like me, I was certainly intrigued to see whether this was really going to offer the shooting experience that I've been looking for. I mean, for starters, it's half frame, which means lower cost per shot so that you can capture more shots per roll, and that also means that there's less guilt when you still manage to absolutely butcher a simple photo of your dinner. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term half frame, basically you get two photos on one frame. So instead of shooting a typical 36 by 24mm full frame image, it squeezes two 17 by 24mm shots, hence the name Pentax 17. That means you get twice as many shots per roll, which is potentially great for your wallet, but less great for image quality, as we'll discuss a little later on. But to me, it sounds like the perfect gateway drug. So after filling my Amazon cart with more film than you'll ever shoot in one lifetime, I was ready to get started. And with a trip to Las Vegas coming up, it seemed like a pretty perfect opportunity to try this portable point and shoot. Now, whilst I was out in Las Vegas shooting, sweating, squinting, and almost certainly getting lost at least twice, I was very glad I actually planned ahead for once, because this time I used a service called Saily, who are today's sponsors, and avoided the usual roaming charges nightmare. Now, if you haven't heard of it before, Saily is a digital eSIM service that lets you instantly connect to local data networks in over 200 destinations worldwide. You don't need a physical SIM card, instead you just download the Saily app, pick your destination, choose a plan, and boom, you're online. Now, I went with their 5GB plan whilst in the US, and it was flawless for using things like maps, uploading images, and a bit of casual doom scrolling. Get an exclusive 15% discount on any plan using the code Calton. Just download the Saily app to get started, or go to saily.com/Calton to find out more information. And as always, I'll be sure to leave links to everything in a pinned comment down below somewhere and in the video description. Anyway, let's get back to the camera and let's quickly talk about the design and handling, because I'll be totally honest and say that I still don't love the look of this camera. It feels neither vintage nor modern. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, making it weird looking but also somewhat charming all at the same time. Bit like me, I guess. The build quality is also a bit of a mixed bag too. It's got a nice chunky magnesium top plate, super ergonomic grip, and a bunch of tactile dials, which is all great. But then you also get a viewfinder that looks like it was ripped straight off a disposable camera from 1997, and the plastic used to house this lens on the front is about as cheap and as plasticky as, well, Las Vegas. It's almost as if somebody half designed a premium camera, then left the rest to an intern to figure out. Now, on the top, you do get a handful of controls, but again, it's a mixture of professional and super basic that just feels a bit odd. Starting with the mode dial, there's the obligatory full auto mode, but then you get 2 program modes, 2 low light shooting modes, then there's bokeh mode and B, which is obviously for bulb. Now, let's face it, with a maximum aperture of f3.5 and shooting half frame, bokeh mode is about as much use as a condom in a convent. But if you do want to try and squeeze out some kind of background blur when shooting up close, then this option is the one you need to stick to, because there's no way to manually set the aperture, which is a bit of a shame. So what's going on with the doubled up options here? Well, the ones marked in orange will force the flash to fire when you use them, whilst the ones marked in white won't allow the flash to fire at all. Full auto mode allows the camera to do what it thinks is best, and bulb mode will keep the shutter open for as long as you keep the shutter button depressed. Now, once you know all of that, it's pretty straightforward, but again, given that this is aimed at people who have probably never used a film camera before, I do feel like these options could have been simplified a bit better. Now, on the opposite side of the camera, we do get a dedicated ISO dial that locks in place and an exposure compensation dial, which I do really appreciate. In the middle here, we have our optical viewfinder, and this is incredibly basic. All you get as you peer through are some frame lines for helping to compose your shots, and then 2 super bright LED lights at the side that threaten to burn out your retinas each time you get something wrong as some kind of sick and twisted punishment. There's an orange light and a blue light, and they'll either flash or stay solid independently or together depending on what the issue is. And trying to understand what each of these cryptic Morse code-like messages mean still escapes my memory. The only ones that I do kind of remember are that single blue flashy light, like that. Maybe, no, kind of. Is it going to do it? No, we've got single orange light instead, but single blue flashy light means, oi dickhead, you've left the lens cap on. And if it goes into full-on 80s disco mode where you got both lights flashing, it means you've forgotten to wind the film on. But other than that, I kind of lost interest in trying to remember all of these warnings. For the most part, all you need to know is that flashy lights mean bad, and usually it doesn't take too long to figure out what the problem is from there. Again though, I just wish all of this was a lot less cryptic and way more intuitive. But where I think Pentax may have suffered its biggest lapse in judgment is with the focusing. Now that's because this camera doesn't have any autofocus, and it doesn't have a proper manual focus either. It instead relies solely on a zone focus system, and you have to pick from yet more glyphs to approximate how far away your subject is. For example, you'd pick the mountain for a super fast subject or landscapes. The single person or group of friends, whatever friends are all fairly self-explanatory, as are the flower or the plate of food. But if you work better with actual measurements rather than pictures, then you can also flip the camera over, and under here you can see that you do have the proper measurements too. The only problem is I do kind of wish that they put this writing on upside down, because instinctively I want to flip the camera up to check the measurements, and obviously this way up you can't read it, and turning the camera around 180 degrees to face you in order to read those numbers just feels slightly clumsy to me. Anyway, my complaint about this system isn't that it doesn't work, because it actually does pretty well. No, my complaint really is, why doesn't this come with autofocus?
He's got a point.
Now don't get me wrong, zone focus can be great. Street photographers have used it for decades, but when you remember that this is meant to be a camera aimed at enticing over smartphone veterans, asking them to get to grips with zone focus all feels a bit half-baked to me. Plus, when shooting in full auto mode, which most beginners probably will, the camera will just completely ignore your focus setting entirely and defaults to using pan focus, which is a technique where everything within the frame from foreground to background is kept in focus by using a narrower aperture. So if you try to focus close up in auto mode, then expect your nice shot of a flower to be blurrier than your memory after a night out in Vegas. Not that I would know anything about that. Now, all of that would genuinely be fine if this camera had some means of communicating with you about what it's doing. But because there's no LCD display or even a heads-up display in the viewfinder, there's no way of seeing what the current shutter speed or aperture value the camera is currently set to. So you just kind of have to trust that you've set it to the right thing and that the camera knows what it's doing. It feels a bit like taking the steering wheel off a car and then saying, don't worry, the car drives itself, probably. Now, I understand why why they've done this. I think it's probably because they've tried to make it less intimidating by taking away some of the technical controls and numbers like shutter speed and aperture. But they've also rather confusingly left semi-complex stuff like zone focus, exposure compensation, and this mix of glyphs on the mode dial, which are hardly beginner friendly. And as a result, at times, the camera just feels slightly awkward and confusing to shoot with, and that's coming from someone who actually knows a bit about photography. Sometimes. Bullshit! But if you do decide to scale the mountain and actually get to grips with this camera like I did, is it all worth it? Well, I think yeah. And no. Whilst many film purists will always prefer having maximum resolution and finer detail offered by true 35mm shots, personally, I've really enjoyed the freedom granted by having 72 frames rather than just 36. I found myself just not worrying quite as much about whether the shot is worth it. I could just relax and shoot whatever I wanted. I was able to embrace the idea that I wouldn't be punished by making mistakes or taking crap photos. And suddenly, that started to make film photography feel way more fun again. Well, at least until it came to developing. You see, unfortunately, I became victim to a few blunders. One of my own doing, I'll admit, but one that was not. Now, starting with my own stupidity, after finishing my first roll of film, I totally forgot that I need to actually push this button on the bottom here in order to rewind the roll of film. So when I couldn't get the film to rewind, for some stupid reason, I thought, maybe lifting the lever will be the thing. Nah, no, because that actually opens up the rear door, causing light to piss onto my undeveloped film. Good job, Tom.
You blew it.
So obviously the first 10 shots or so on that reel had some creative light leaks that were added, and that wasn't perfect, but not a total disaster. What was a total disaster, however, is that one of the other rolls of film that I shot was accidentally underdeveloped by the film lab that I sent it to, so that all the photos looked like a badly scanned negative from a 1930s textbook. Now, although neither of those issues were the camera's fault, it was still a harsh reminder to me of how vulnerable you are using film. And when a roll of film takes you twice as long to use up because now you have 72 shots to capture, let me tell you, that really does sting. But third time's the charm, right? And luckily, the color roll that I shot with came out great. Over the course of a month that I've been shooting with this, I used 3 rolls of film. Firstly, I tried my hand at this lucky SHD 100 roll of film, and this is a black and white film, which was unfortunately the one that I decided to add some light leaks to. Then I used a roll of Kodak Gold before finally using a reel of this black and white lucky SHD 400 film, which was also the one that unfortunately got ruined in the development process. So as it turns out, the lucky film wasn't that lucky after all, but if you like the look of any of these images, I'll be sure to leave links in a pinned comment below as to where you can find the film that I used. Now, in terms of image quality, because it's half frame, the results will obviously appear much grainier than normal, and the negatives will be smaller, and so if you're the kind of person who likes to zoom into 100% on every single scan, this really isn't going to be for you. But for posting online, as was intended, this is totally fine. The lens on this camera is surprisingly sharp too, and as silly as it might sound having a HD coating on a film camera, it actually does a really good job, and most of the shots I took were totally usable. Now, the 2 biggest causes of me capturing unusable shots were down to my own user error, which shouldn't be surprising if you've watched any of my videos before. Now, inside the viewfinder, you'll see 2 sets of frame lines. The larger set is the one you're meant to use for 90% of the time, and the smaller set is for when you're taking close-up shots. But I found that when I was reacting quickly to a moment when I was taking street photography, I kept using the wrong frame lines because I just used the one that my eye would focus on first, which was sometimes the smaller set for some reason. Personally, I think it would have been much better if they'd have just somehow managed to make these frame lines change as you rotate the focus ring, so that the small lines only show when you want to capture something close up and the large frame lines show up for the rest of the time, and that would just minimize the chance of making a mistake, especially for beginners. The second error was caused by this mode dial getting knocked onto the wrong setting. It's just way too easy to rotate and there's no lock button. So unless you're constantly checking it to make sure that you've set it to the right mode or it hasn't been knocked, it's really easy to take a bunch of shots in the wrong setting without realizing, which is exactly what happened here. I managed to knock it from program to the next mode along, which is slow shutter mode, and I got a bunch of frames that were totally blurred and unusable, which is really frustrating. But where the Pentax 17 really stumbles is with the price. At just under $500, it really can't be considered as cheap, not for what it is at least. That price puts it in the same bracket as some really capable secondhand full-frame SLRs, or maybe 12 Ilford sprites all duct taped together. Yes, it's new, and yes, that means it comes with the added bonus of having a manufacturer's warranty that didn't expire in 1980, but it's also a pretty expensive way to capture candid snaps. And we haven't even gotten onto the repeat cost of film, developing, and scans, which just for context cost me around $145 Canadian all in for just 3 reels, which is roughly 105 in freedom dollars. The Pentax 17 is exactly what you'd get if somebody who grew up using film cameras had a go at designing a new film camera in 2025 for people who grew up only using smartphones. But they also forgot to ask those people what they'd actually want from a camera. The result is something that feels a slightly confusing mess and probably won't 100% satisfy beginners or enthusiasts. For anyone looking to get into film photography for social media content in 2025, you might honestly be better off picking up something like the Kodak Ektar. Sure, it's plastic, very basic, and provides that soft disposable camera kind of look rather than a more polished result like this thing, but it's less than 1/10 of the cost, and it's fully automatic with way fewer pitfalls. Just point it in the right direction and push the button. As for more experienced film photographers who might be eyeing this as a casual everyday carry along, I feel like this was very close to being just that, but with no manual exposure controls and a less than enticing price tag, unfortunately it may have just missed the mark. Is it fun to shoot with? Sure, well, for most of the time, but does it make me actually want to get out there and take more photos? Well, not really. After a month of continuously shooting with it, then waiting further for the photos to be developed, and only coming away with a handful of okay shots that cost me over $100 for the pleasure, I think I'll probably give this one a miss. After all, if I wanted a camera that made shooting this unmemorable, I'd have just stuck with my smartphone.